Hello, and welcome back to our mini course about emotions, developed by experts in emotions and mental health, as well as clinical psychologists. In the first 3 videos, we spoke about what emotions are, how to identify them, and we talked about secondary emotions. Today, we'll be looking at what we can do to help manage strong emotions. This is a long video that will cover 3 strategies, so feel free to take a break between each one. And don't forget your workbook to write down your thoughts and ideas. First, let's go back to what we said in the first video. An emotion is a natural response to a situation. However, natural or not, these emotions can sometimes be difficult to manage. They can be painful, confusing, and overwhelming. Some of us may engage in unhelpful coping behaviors to help manage these emotions, such as binge eating, restrictive eating, or excessive exercise. After using these strategies, we may feel relieved for a short while. The problem, though, is that engaging in these strategies does not actually help manage emotions in the long term, and they also often lead to secondary emotions, such as guilt and shame, repeating the emotional cycle. So what can we do instead to manage unpleasant emotions? There are many things you can do, and today we'll cover 3 strategies: reappraisal, distraction, and acceptance, that each target different stages of the emotional cycle. Let's start with reappraisal, which means changing our interpretation of the event. We've just seen that emotions are a natural response to a situation. Simple, right? But actually, it is slightly more complicated than this. In between the situation and the emotion, there is your interpretation of the situation. Let's take an example. Do you remember our example about Annie who wanted to go to the theatre and her friend who stood her up? Annie felt really angry and hurt for being stood up. But then her friend explained that she had to go to the hospital as her mom had had a fall. Annie then realized that her friend did not forget about her. She just had to deal with an emergency. Annie did not feel angry or hurt anymore. Here, the situation is still the same, but her emotions changed based on her new interpretation. Sometimes, the interpretations come from the outside, through people explaining things from a different perspective. But sometimes, it can come through your own interpretation. Let's take another example. It is getting really cold, it is raining, and it is dark by 4 p.m. Autumn is most definitely here, and you feel sad about it. Now, autumn on its own is not what makes you feel sad. It is your interpretation of it. You may be thinking, summer is over, I did not even go to the beach once. And this gives rise to the emotion of sadness. You're mourning the fact that your summer is over. However, you can try to construct a new interpretation of it, such as, we'll be able to go on lovely walks. I love the crunchy sound of the leaves under my feet in autumn. And here, instead of sadness, you may feel some happiness at this prospect. Here, the situation is still the same, it is still autumn, but your interpretation of it gives rise to a different emotion. So how can we reappraise events to change our emotional reactions? We can start by asking ourselves these questions. Can there be any positive outcome that result from the situation? Are you grateful about any part of this? Could there also be another explanation that you have not thought about? Sometimes, involving a friend can be helpful because they may be more detached from the situation and they may help you view it from a different perspective. We recommend that you practice this skill at home by first identifying the situation objectively. What are the facts? Who, what, where, and when? Second, identify your initial emotion. Third, try to come up with an alternative interpretation. And fourth, try to identify your new emotional state. Feel free to stop the video here if you wanted to first try this strategy before you learn about the other 2. And remember that you can download our workbook to practice this skill. Also, please remember that change is hard. It is hard to stop engaging in unhelpful behaviors and very hard to learn new skills. This won't come in a day, but eventually it will be worth your efforts. Okay, so we have seen that reappraisal may help you view the situation from a different perspective. But sometimes When the emotion is too intense, it can be really difficult to think about alternative interpretations. You are too consumed about this emotion, and you may want to engage in unhelpful coping behaviors to make it all go away. In this case, distraction may be the right strategy. Distraction is doing an activity to take your mind off the emotion while the emotional weather passes. This can be absolutely anything, such as calling a friend or listening to your favorite metal band really loudly, or going for a quiet walk. You can also try to practice slow and deep breathing. This one is quite good because, as well as distracting you, it also helps regulate your heart rate and calms you down. You may already engage in many of these activities, and you can also check out our workbook if you need more inspiration for distracting activities. Ultimately, distraction does not help you deal with the emotion, but it does allow you to reduce its intensity until you can master reappraisal or acceptance, which we'll see next. An important note of caution here is that sometimes you may engage in unhelpful strategies such as compulsive exercise as a way of distracting you from your intense emotions. But the distraction technique needs to come before you engage in these unhelpful strategies to help you manage emotion while the emotional weather passes, so you don't engage in behavior that causes you more harm in the long term. Again, you can stop the video here, practice the skill, and come back to the last part of the video at a later stage. Acceptance means being aware of your emotions and accepting them for what they are right now, knowing that they will pass. It is a skill that helps you remain calm while the emotional weather happens. So instead of feeling unpleasant emotions like a tornado, it feels more like slight rain that comes and goes. So how can you do this? First, before you accept your emotions, you need to identify them. Watch video 2 again if you need a reminder on how to do this. Once identified, you will need to withhold any judgment about that emotion. It is just an emotion. It is there to help you make you aware of a situation that you find challenging, but it will pass like the weather. You are allowed to feel this emotion, and you're not a bad person for feeling this way. Third, you will need to let go of the emotion. It may seem paradoxical to let go if you're trying to accept them, but by letting go, we mean not holding on to it and thinking about it over and over. It's more about acknowledging it and then letting it go to move on. You can think of it a bit like a balloon going up and away. You can still see it in the sky, but it's not bothering you. You have let go of it. It may sound simple, but actually it is not that simple. And here are some things that make it difficult. First, as we discussed in video 2, we usually experience more than one emotion at the same time, so it can be difficult to identify them. At first, try to focus on one at a time until you better master this skill. 2, your emotion may be too intense. If that is the case, use a distraction technique while the emotional weather passes, and then you can come back to it when you feel calmer. 3, you may judge yourself while noticing that you're judging your emotions. Try to be kind to yourself. Already being aware of the fact that you judge your emotion is a huge first step. It is a very difficult skill to master, and it will take time. You can use our booklet to help you practice acceptance. Remember that this is a hard strategy, really effective, but hard to master. So you will need to practice a lot, and it will not always work, but little by little, this is achievable. So what have we learned today? Actually, so much. So you may want to rewatch this video a few more times. An emotional cycle goes like this. First, there's a situation that gives rise to an emotion. You may engage in unhelpful coping behaviors to give you some reliefs from these intense, unpleasant emotions. But these give rise to secondary emotions, and the emotional cycle continues unresolved. But today, we have learned that there are things that you can do to manage your emotions. By using reappraisal, you can try to change how you view a situation to change your emotions. When your emotions feel too intense, you can use distraction to avoid using unhelpful strategies while the emotional weather passes. And finally, you can learn to accept your emotions for what they are without judging them and letting them go. Mastering these strategies will take time and practice, like any skill such as playing a musical instrument, and you can use our workbook to help. Do also stay tuned for the last video on what you can do to prevent experiencing overwhelming emotions in the first place. Thank you.